Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into a purely visual mystery, and we're going to do it using absolutely nothing but photographic evidence to train our eyes. Most of the time we take our vision entirely for granted, right? We glance at an object, our brain quickly slaps a label on it, and we just move on. But today, we're going to slow that whole process way down. We're going to examine a single solitary object captured from multiple angles, acting as visual detectives to understand exactly how form, color, and space all interact to create the reality we see. So get ready to look closely, because the more you study this thing, the more fascinating it becomes. So here is our subject. Notice this strange multicolored object just resting on that dark mirror-like surface. The lighting is super moody, the environment feels rich, and the artifact itself sits there looking almost like a tiny monolithic monument. But hey, before we try to quickly categorize it or figure out what it actually does, let's just take a second to observe its sheer presence. It's wildly jagged, incredibly colorful, and it's casting this deep, perfect twin right below it in the reflection. It honestly looks complex, chaotic, and intentionally designed to confuse the eye. Well, our goal today is to untangle that visual chaos. All right, let's get into section 1, Meet the Artifact. I want to pause here for a brief beat and ask you a genuine question. What exactly are we looking at? Seriously, I want you to actively study the shape and form of this artifact right now. The human brain is basically a categorization machine. It always wants to save cognitive energy by instantly comparing a new shape to something you already know. So what's your brain telling you? Is it a star? Maybe an unfolding flower? Or is it just some randomized knot of rigid geometric shapes? By actively challenging yourself to define its complex outline right now, you're actually priming your visual cortex. Trust me, you'll be much more prepared for how we break it all down in the next few minutes. Moving right along to section 2, Colors and Components. If we extract the primary data from our visual investigation, we can firmly catalog 6 distinct colors scattered across these rigid panels. We've got a vibrant red, a bright yellow, a rich green, deep blue, purple, and orange. And notice, these aren't blended together in some smooth gradient. They are sharply separated, sitting on completely distinct geometric planes. This specific color palette is our baseline data. It's the visual alphabet this object is using to communicate its shape to us. And honestly, this is a brilliant design choice. Human vision evolved to prioritize high-contrast colors, so we could quickly identify things against a uniform background. By putting these stark primary and secondary colors side by side, the puzzle is essentially exploiting our evolutionary biology. It is literally demanding our immediate attention. But look a little closer at the framing around those colorful faces. Do you see those scuffed, worn white edges? This brilliantly illustrates a really crucial point. This isn't some pristine, untouchable artifact locked away in a museum. It's a highly tactile puzzle. Those chipped corners, the subtle scratches, the slightly stressed seams, they tell us an entire story. They reveal a physical object with a long history of being folded, twisted, dropped, and heavily manipulated by human hands. We know, simply by looking at the wear and tear, that this object is designed to move. It's meant to be transformed. Which brings us to section 3, Structural Core and Geometry. To truly wrap our heads around the structure of this moving puzzle, we need the right terminology. Let's talk about a vertex. That's defined as the common point where multiple lines, edges, or faces meet. Think of it as the ultimate mathematical crossroads of a geometric shape. This concept is absolutely vital for understanding how our mysterious object maintains its structural integrity while still allowing for such complex, jagged formations to exist all at once. Because without a central axis point, the whole thing would just fall apart into a loose pile of plastic. Applying that definition, we can see exactly how it works here. You can see how the blocky, rectangular, and triangular arms are all radiating outward from one tightly clustered central point. This vertex acts like a flexible, incredibly dense core. All the chaotic energy of the different colored blocks is anchored right here in the middle, allowing the appendages to shoot out in wildly different directions. It's honestly an impressive feat of engineering, giving the puzzle maximum flexibility while keeping all those distinct planes safely tethered to a single origin. As you look at these blocky arms pointing every which way, consider this for a second. Do the shapes themselves change, or just our view of them? Well, we know for a fact that these plastic blocks are completely rigid. They do not bend and they do not warp. But as we're about to see, the reality of what the object looks like in three-dimensional space is remarkably unstable. Buckle up, because our brains are about to experience a bit of cognitive dissonance. Let's explore that in section 4, Rotations in Space. Check out this stark contrast. Over on the left, we've got a specific angle where the object presents heavy greens, vivid yellows, and a touch of orange. But look at the angle on the right. Those greens and yellows are almost entirely hidden, completely replaced by a dominant palette of purples, blues, and reds. It looks like a totally different object, right? Yet all we've done is rotated around that structural core we just identified. It's an incredible visual trick where a simple twist in space completely redefines the dominant color profile. Now, what's really fascinating is how rotation alters not just the color, but the entire physical footprint of the object. Our human brain processes silhouettes in a matter of milliseconds, way before it ever registers internal details or colors. On the left, the silhouette is wide, sprawling, and open. It almost looks like a bird taking flight. But on the right, it feels taller, denser, and incredibly tightly packed. The jagged edges create an entirely new perimeter. Because our brains rely so heavily on that initial silhouette shape, if you only ever saw the left image, you would completely fail to recognize the right image as the exact same puzzle. Crazy, right? So the absolutely crucial point here is this. The object remains static. Our perspective is dynamic. The artifact isn't physically changing its shape between these photographs. Instead, our angle of observation completely dictates our reality of it. We are the ones moving, and in doing so, we're literally reshaping the truth of what we see. Finally, let's hit Section 5, Reflections and Perspectives. To round out our visual investigation today, we really have to look at the environment. Let's quickly define a reflection. It's an image seen in a mirror or shiny surface, representing a perfect inverted duplication. In every single photograph we've looked at so far, the bottom half of the visual evidence is governed by this principle. Reflections are entirely natural visual data processing tools, and let's see how this inverted duplication fundamentally enhances our understanding of the puzzle. Focus purely on the bottom half for a moment. That dark, slightly distorted reflection acts almost like a dark, oil-drawn painting of the object above. It adds just an immense amount of depth to the composition. But more importantly, it grounds the jagged puzzle. You see, without a shadow or reflection, the brain might interpret the object as some floating abstraction. But this inverted twin makes it feel like a heavy, physical item anchored securely to a specific location in space. But reflections aren't just there to look pretty. They're actually highly functional visual tools. Look at these two angles side by side. The reflection actually provides missing visual data. Because the camera is looking slightly downward, there are entire panels of color facing the floor that we flat out cannot see on the physical object itself, but the reflection reveals them. The human brain acts kind of like a 3D rendering engine, constantly searching for environmental clues, like mirrors or shadows, to paint a full picture of the unseen world. Here, the reflection allows us to see the underside of the puzzle, essentially giving us a 360-degree mental map of the object from a single static photograph. And when everything lines up just right, the optical illusion is absolute magic. Examine this highly symmetrical angle. The physical artifact and its reflection seamlessly merge into one mesmerizing, continuous geometric pillar. Because of the perfect alignment, the boundary between the real object and the mirrored illusion practically vanishes. Your brain genuinely struggles to find the seam, creating this towering, impossible structure out of what is just a small, worn plastic puzzle. Through this entire visual investigation, from analyzing the basic colors all the way to observing the complex reflections, we arrive at a pretty powerful conclusion. Reality is defined by the angle of observation. We've seen how a single, static, rigid object can dramatically change its dominant colors, entirely shift its recognizable silhouette, and seamlessly merge with its own reflection to create brand new forms. The physical reality of the object never changed, not even once. How we perceive structure, color, and truth is entirely dependent on where we choose to stand. Which leaves us with this final thought to take away from our explainer today. What else in your world changes entirely when you simply shift your point of view? I mean, if a simple plastic puzzle resting on a table can hold this many visual secrets and entirely rewrite its own geometry from moment to moment, imagine what else you might discover if you just take a step to the left, look a little closer, and actively observe. Keep training your eyes and keep exploring.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolutely fascinating relationship between form, color, and perspective. And we're going to do this by meticulously analyzing a single, brilliantly complex geometric object. You know, it's so easy to look at something once and think we totally understand its shape, its color, its boundaries. But what actually happens when we freeze the form in space, rotate around it, and document every shifting facet? Well, we quickly learned that reality is entirely dependent on our vantage point. This explainer is going to challenge how you perceive three-dimensional space, all through the lens of one simple yet endlessly complex physical structure that honestly looks a bit like a Rubik's Cube that gave up halfway through.
To make sense of all this, we're going to break our exploration down into 5 quick stages. First, the anatomy of the object, then its shifting color palette, symmetry in its reflection, changing perspectives, and finally, visualizing the complete form. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Anatomy of the object. Let's kick things off by looking at the fundamental physical building blocks of our subject here while it's just resting.
Okay, take a really close look at this form. It kind of looks like a puzzle frozen right in the middle of a twist, doesn't it? It's built from these distinct interconnected triangular prism blocks that all meet at a central axis. And notice how every single block is framed by these thick, white edges? Those borders act almost like a skeleton. They outline the geometry and really draw our eyes to the sharp angles and flat planes. Now, the object is resting on this highly reflective, dark surface, which immediately gives us a duplicate view down below. But if we just focus on the top half for a second, we see this chaotic yet super-structured arrangement of colored faces. You've got orange, green, yellow, and blue all jutting out at completely different orientations.
So, what do we actually know for a fact here? If we break down the visual evidence, we can spot these consistent, discrete units, the quanta of this puzzle, if you will, that merge together to create the whole complex structure. We absolutely know we're dealing with interconnected triangular prisms. We know they've got those distinct white framing edges outlining their shape. We know there's a mix of primary and secondary colored faces. Plus, there's that symmetrical central joint where all these pieces pivot and connect. And of course, it rests on a dark, glossy surface. These are absolute fundamental building blocks.
All right, moving on to Section 2, a shifting color palette. This brings us to exactly how color and angle interact.
Now, what's truly mind-blowing is how the object's apparent color palette drastically changes based entirely on our vantage point. Look at the image on the left. From this specific angle, the object feels cool and bright. It's showing dominant yellow, green, and blue faces. It literally looks like it's completely made of just those 3 colors. But then, glance over at the image on the right. This is the exact same object but from a completely different side, and bam! It explodes with these vibrant, warm purples, reds, and oranges. The stark contrast here is just incredible. I mean, if you only ever saw the left side, you'd swear for sure this was a green, yellow, and blue object. See only the right side, you'd be totally convinced it was red, purple, and orange.
By extracting this visual data into a quick, structured map, we realize something pretty profound about observation itself. A single, static object contains multiple, hidden visual identities that can never, ever be seen all at once. When we look at our reference frame for yellow, green, and blue, the red and purple are entirely, completely hidden from view. When we rotate around to see that purple, red, and blue mix, well, the orange and yellow just vanish. This tells us that our visual reality at any given moment is really only a partial truth. The full color spectrum of this object exists, sure, but our perspective forces us to only experience a tiny fraction of it at a time.
Section 3. Symmetry in the reflection. For this next part, let's actually shift our focus downward to the dark surface it's resting on.
Notice how the dark, polished surface beneath the object doesn't just cast some fuzzy shadow, it acts as a perfect, flawless mirror. It returns the light directly, creating this striking vertical symmetry. It essentially doubles the visual data we have to process, turning a complex upper shape into an even more complex, unified geometric column.
And this visual right here brilliantly illustrates that concept. Just look at this specific framing. Here, a very precise angle aligns the physical prisms with their exact reflection, merging the two halves into an entirely new, seamless geometric illusion. The gap between the physical object and the reflective surface almost vanishes completely. Instead of a top-heavy cluster of blocks, our brain suddenly reads this as a single, floating, diamond-like starburst. The bold red and purple blocks on the right mirror perfectly downwards, while the blue and green blocks do the exact same on the left. The reflection doesn't just copy the object. At this perfect vantage point, it completely finishes it, creating a visual harmony that simply doesn't exist in the physical space about the table.
Moving on to Section 4, angles and changing perspectives. Let's track how even slight rotational shifts can completely reframe our understanding of the object's geometry. To truly wrap our heads around the 3D nature of this thing, we need to actively track it. So try this quick exercise with me. Step 1. We'll locate a really distinctive block. Let's go with the blue one. Step 2, we're going to track its position. And step 3, we observe the new colors revealed as it moves. This kind of active tracking is exactly how our brains build a 3D map from flat 2D images.
Let's actually see this in action.
Focus on the image on the left. Find that blue block. It's right near the top center, flanked by the yellow and green ones. Okay, now shift your eyes over to the image on the right. If we track that exact same blue block, we see it's now rotated to the top left position. And as it rotated, the entire landscape of the object completely changed. The vibrant orange blocks that were super prominent on the left image have shifted downward, and this totally new purple face has rotated into view on the far right. By tracking these distinct markers between two different vantage points, we're literally watching the object turn in space. We also see how the negative space, the gaps and shadows between the physical shapes, alters completely as the prisms overlap in totally new ways.
And finally, Section 5, visualizing the complete form. Let's synthesize all these fragmented, rotated views we've been looking at to mentally construct the complete three-dimensional form.
This brings us to a seriously powerful realization, because we literally cannot see the entire object from a single angle. One side will always be hidden in shadow or obscured by the blocks in front of it. Its true shape exists only as the sum of all perspectives combined. Its arete, which is a Greek concept referring to its complete excellence of form, its true holistic nature, can never actually be captured in a single photograph. It has to be constructed in our minds by merging all these discrete, limited visual points into one unified mental model.
By comparing these highly complex configurations, we are forced to do that exact mental work. Just look at the left. It's a chaotic tumble of red, purple, and blue pointing outward. Then on the right, it's a totally different alignment where blue and yellow dominate, with red tucked right underneath. To understand the whole object, we have to mentally connect these opposing sides. We've got to stitch together the cool side and the warm side, the diamond illusion and the fragmented chaos. We're actively bridging the gap between what is immediately visible right now and what is completely hidden from view on the far side of the object.
As we look at this final image, which by the way is yet another completely unique configuration of green, yellow, and orange, it leaves us with a really compelling thought to take away from this explainer. We've just spent this time proving that a single, static object can reveal completely different identities, different colors, and entirely different geometric shapes just by changing our viewing angle by a few degrees. So it really begs the question, if something this simple changes so drastically based on where we stand, how much of our everyday reality, our daily interactions, and our broader worldview is dictated entirely by our own incredibly narrow, single point of view? It's definitely something to think about the next time you assume you're seeing the whole picture. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring your perspectives.
All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating. We're going to take a meticulous, almost art critique-style look at a single, incredibly complex object. But we're not just going to glance at it and move on. No, we are going to study this thing from 12 completely distinct vantage points. By the time we wrap up, you'll see how structured observation can absolutely transform the way you perceive something that, at first glance, just looks chaotic. So get comfortable, because we're about to decode a serious puzzle. But right off the bat, I want to ask you this. How many perspectives does it actually take to truly know an object? Really think about that for a second. In our day-to-day lives, we usually just see the front of something, right? The facade, and we just kind of assume we understand the entire 3D form based on that one fixed angle. But can a single angle ever give you the complete truth of a shape in space? That central mystery is exactly what we're going to unravel today. Now, to give our visual analysis today a bit of a philosophical anchor, we're going to frame this whole thing around the concept of arete. Basically, arete denotes excellence, potential, or the fulfillment of purpose. For us today, it's all about the act of merging multiple incomplete states to find total realization. We're on a hunt for the true essence of our object by taking all of its fragmented, isolated views and pulling them together in our minds. Okay, let's take a look at the overall silhouette of our subject. At first glance, you're hit with this star-like, chaotic geometry. It's this intricate folding puzzle just resting against a dark void. Notice how those white plastic hinges act almost like a skeleton? They're binding these completely different, bright rectangular blocks into a single unified structure. And from this specific angle, it actually feels a little off balance, leaning hard to the left, with the top faces dominated by greens and yellows. It is a crazy snapshot of a complex form just frozen in time. But honestly, to really get this object, we've got to break it down. We've seen the macro shape, so let's shift gears and deconstruct the palette, focusing on that vibrant, almost primary color scheme covering its surface. When you look at the breakdown of observable colors, you can almost treat this plastic surface like an oil painting bursting with contrasting hues. It's a highly deliberate palette. We've got these stark reds, deep blues, bright greens, striking yellows, vivid oranges, and rich purples, and they're all segmented by those stark white hinges. What's wild here is realizing that your perception of the object at any given moment is entirely dictated by whichever of these color clusters just happens to be facing you. But there's a much deeper story here than just colors and shapes. When we put two different angles side by side, we uncover a whole narrative about tactile human use. Look over on the left. Those green and orange stickers are heavily damaged, scraped, peeling, you name it. But then look over on the right. From this completely different angle, the blue and red faces look pristine, almost untouched. It is the exact same object, but the story of how it's been held, twisted, and worn down changes completely depending on where you stand. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Keep your eyes on the scuffs and peeling white edges right down there in the lower left corner. See the little chips in the green sticker, the scratches on the white hinge? These imperfections are absolutely crucial. They humanize the object. Without this wear and tear, we'd just be looking at a piece of cold, abstract geometry. But these flaws, they prove this thing has been used. It exists in the real world, fully subject to friction and time. All right, let's move into Section 1, the dark mirror, unveiling the hidden underside. Notice the surface the object is actually resting on. This dark, oil-like environment acts like a shadow twin. And what's so brilliant about this is that the reflection isn't just there to look cool. It's a massive tool for observation. It acts as a mirror, showing us the hidden underside colors like those deep purples and reds that are physically pointing entirely away from us. While the top half hides its secrets, the bottom reflection totally betrays them. It's basically a cheat code to see the back of the object without ever having to walk around it. So, what is this reflection actually doing for us? Well, it changes our mental model of the object in 3 huge ways. First, like we just said, it reveals those hidden bottom faces, the literal dark side of the puzzle. Second, it duplicates the geometry. By creating a mirror image, our brains suddenly perceive this larger, symmetrical pattern, turning what was a top-heavy star into a balanced, diamond-like structure. And third, it visually grounds the shape, giving it weight rather than just letting it float in space. So, we've isolated all our variables: the skeleton, the colors, the wear and tear, and the dark mirror. Now, it's time for the 360-degree journey. Let's map this out and see how it builds as the object rotates in space. Point 1 kicks off with a green and yellow anchor, leaning way over to the left. But as it turns to point 2, those colors recede and bam, this orange and purple shift takes over the center mass, totally changing how heavy the object feels. Finally, we hit point 3, and a blue and red dominance emerges, completely rewriting the puzzle's visual identity. Watching this flow really proves how different clusters rise and fall from prominence just by turning the object a few degrees. If you check out this comparison table, it really drives home how wild these shifts in perspective are. Notice how those dominant top colors change radically from green and orange over to purple and blue, and then to blue and red. And crucially, look at how the exposed wear level changes right along with it. From one angle, the object looks wrecked, and from another, it looks brand new. It is literally the same object, but each distinct angle is giving us a completely different yet equally true reality. And that brings us to this incredible snapshot right here. This perfectly illustrates our final synthesized view. When we look at this, we aren't just seeing plastic blocks anymore. We are experiencing the air-state merge. You see the bold colors defining the shape. You see the scuffed edges proving its history in human hands. And you see that deep reflection grounding the whole thing in reality. It all just clicks together into a single beautiful snapshot, order found right inside the chaos. Which leads us perfectly to the core thesis of the already merge. Excellence is found not in a single perfect angle, but by merging the flawed, worn, and reflected realities of all 12 viewpoints. Simply put, you literally cannot know the truth of the whole until you've put in the work to observe all of its messy individual parts. And as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We just spent this time meticulously deconstructing a plastic puzzle. But think about the challenges, the situations, and the people you deal with every single day. When you look at the world, are you truly seeing the whole object, or are you rushing to judgment based on just one of its 12 sides? I hope this inspires you to take a beat, rotate the puzzle, and look a little closer at the world around you. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.